Hey guys, we're going to dust off our weddings in Japan playlist and put this video on there because we've had a message from one of our supporters on Patreon. One of our most generous supporters on Patreon actually has said that he's coming to Japan and he's going to be meeting his girlfriend's parents. So he wants to know if we got any advice for him. So obviously that means that he's met his girlfriend. We'd have to assume he's met his girlfriend in his own country and she's actually in his country and they've met and then they're coming back to Japan together and he's going to meet the parents. So we're going to put on the wedding playlist. No pressure at all on that particular person to get married, of course, but it's sort of relevant, isn't it? Because in Japan, sort of meeting the parents as the boyfriend or girlfriend, or meeting the parents as the fiance, sort of along the same lines. Really, it's a similar experience. So, oh boy, this is going to be like a 4-hour video. First of all, every video on the How to Do Stuff in Japan playlist will be relevant because all that stuff about how to behave in Japan is going to be relevant to meeting the parents, isn't it? You know, how you handle your chopsticks and how you do everything really is sort of relevant, you know, slippers, toilet slippers, all the things that have potential to embarrass yourself with the in-laws. So yeah, all the things on the how-to playlist are already relevant. And again, we don't know what our friend there knows already, and we don't know what he knows from watching our videos. We don't know what he knows from his own life experience or anything. So we'll just have to treat this from the point of view of all the things that we can think of, all the advice that we can think of to give him, and then, you know, if some of it's useful, then that's good. So first thing would be, first piece of advice, and we've told other people this before that have had similar situations, are going to meet parents for the first time, be as quiet as possible. It's one of those times, occasionally in Japan there's these things about Japanese society that we make videos about that people go, oh, that sounds tricky, I'm not sure if I could do that. But occasionally there are elements of Japanese society that we can use to our advantage, and not in a sort of a negative way, but in a positive way. So one is that, as we've talked about before, shy boys in Japan are really common, and it's really sort of considered to be cool. So quiet guys of any age are sort of admired here, you know. They're shy boys, and every family has shy boys in it, and shy boys are considered to be sort of cool, you know. And it's just much better because we've seen the alternative. What often happens is foreigners come to Japan, and because they get lots of attention, you know, when you turn up as a foreigner in Japan, you will get lots of attention from different people for different reasons. And some foreigners react to that by getting more flamboyant because they're trying to be cool and interesting and, you know, windswept and interesting, as Billy Connolly would say. And as a result, they get extra flamboyant and extra loud and extra animated, and it's really not a good idea. So our advice would be as quiet as possible, and it won't be a problem if you're smiling. I don't know how good your Japanese is, but if it doesn't really matter. If you're smiling and being really quiet and polite and gentle, and these are the things that will be admired. If you're very quiet and very gentle, and you smile a lot and show that you have a gentle and polite demeanor, that will be the most respectful thing. And again, some people really object to videos like this or advice like that because they say, oh, I'm just going to be myself, I'm not going to pretend to be someone else. Well, social behavior is often behaving in a way that's different from a natural response, right? A natural reaction. You know, our natural feeling might be to sit there and ravage the girlfriend, right? But obviously that's not going to be good behavior. So good social behavior is often doing things that are a little bit different from what we want to do. And that's just being considerate to the people around us. So you know, being quiet and respectful and sort of very respectful to the parents and very, very attentive to what they say, and very quiet, very, very polite. Smile so that you're being sort of friendly, because sometimes foreigners can come across as intimidating, particularly if we're big. You know, we sort of come into the house, bomb, 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 and we can seem really big. So if you can sort of move quietly and gently, be really gentle and quiet, it would definitely be a good thing. Touched on ravaging the daughter. Best to show no affection at all towards the daughter, and there's no need to say anything. See, in a lot of societies, if you show lots of affection to the daughter and you say lots of things about how much you love her and how much you care about her and stuff like that, in a lot of societies that would be okay and that would be good because you're showing how much you care about her. In Japanese society, it will just make everybody uncomfortable, most likely. So the best bet would be to don't touch her at all. Don't even hold her hand. Don't touch her at all, because any of that would make the parent probably. I mean, it depends. There are exceptions to this, but the exceptions in Japan are really rare. You know, these generalization videos, all these how-to videos are all generalizations, of course, but they really are generally true. Japan is so parochial that everybody does. Most people do the same thing. The exceptions are really rare, and the dangerous thing that you can do is come here and assume that the people you're talking to are the exception. And we've talked about this on previous videos. There's so many exceptions. There's so many examples of this where you can think the person that you're dealing with is an exception to the rule, and they're really not. You know, and if she's traveling the world, she might be a bit of an international person. Her English might be good, and her parents might be a bit international. Their English might be good. Who knows? And they might come across as being very sort of free-thinking, liberal sort of people. But don't be fooled, because there's a really good chance that they're just as traditional in their Japanese thinking as everybody else is. So we've just got to assume that people are, you know, the way that they usually are here, and the person you're dealing with is not the exception, because that's the quickest way to cause it to end up in trouble, is to assume that this person's different. So we're just going to assume that any sort of touching of the girlfriend is going to make them uncomfortable. You know, no holding hands, no showing of affection, no touching her at all, and there's no need to tell them. You know, in a lot of societies, if you met the parents, you know, you might feel that, look, I want to tell you that I really care about your daughter, and I wouldn't do anything to hurt her, and I really want to look after her, and that might be considered to be a good thing in some societies. Again, it's likely just to make them really uncomfortable, and with cultural differences and language differences, it could end up being a real hornet's nest of trouble. So it's best off not to do it. So the best thing you can do is just treat it like, you know, just be as gentle and quiet and polite and smile and attentive and listen and all that stuff. We've got to apply all the social skills that we can muster. And this isn't overstating the case either, because we're really coming at it from the back foot, you know, in Japan, because there are a lot of people here who really don't want to see their daughter or their son, but usually the daughter with a foreigner, you know, and we've talked about this before. In my case, my brother-in-law was the one. The parents were sort of lukewarm about the idea of their daughter marrying a foreigner or being with a foreigner, but the person with the strongest objections in the family was the older brother. And he just said, no, you know, she shouldn't be with a foreigner. He's just gonna use her, and then he's gonna go back to his own country, and she'll never see him again, and she'll be heartbroken, and, you know, it's a bad idea. And there's a lot of Japanese people that think like that. I had a guy in a Kudo group once, this sort of older guy, and he had 2 daughters, teenagers. And it was before I got married. And he asked me once, "Are you gonna marry a Japanese girl?" And I said, "Oh, I don't know." I said, "Most Japanese girls' parents don't want them to marry a foreigner." And he said, that's not true. You know, he didn't want to admit that was true. "Oh, that's not true. And I said to him, "Okay, well, you got 2 teenage daughters. When they turned 20, if one of them came home with a foreigner and said they're going to get married, how would you feel?" And his face gave away his feelings, right? Because you know, he knew he wouldn't like it. So it's probably a terrible thing to say to you before you're about to meet her parents, but it is an important thing to keep in mind. It's a very important thing to keep in mind that there's a good chance that either both parents or one of the parents or other people in the family are not keen on the daughter marrying a foreigner. And you can turn it round. At our wedding, that brother-in-law stood up at our wedding and said, when my sister first got with this guy and I found out that he was a foreigner and I thought it was a bad idea, and the pair of us sat there cringing because he said this in front of everybody, and then he said, but since then I've seen how well he treats her and how happy she is, and so now I know that it was a good thing to do, right? So you can turn it round. You can turn it round, and quite often these people that have bias and discrimination against foreigners quite often have never had a real relationship with a foreigner. They've never had it. Quite often they've never met a foreigner. So, you know, the only thing they know about foreigners is what they've heard about through other people or seen on television or something. So you can turn it round, but in order to do that, you've really got to have a lot of self-discipline with your behaviour. And you know, the sort of people that we get leaving comments that say, oh, I'd just do the way I do things, I'm not Japanese, I'd just do it my way. Those sort of guys, really, you know, when I read comments like that, I think that guy's got no chance, you know, because that sort of attitude here is just not going to fly. So, you know, of course, if that's what they want to do, they can, but we've been asked to give our advice. So our advice would be just be as gentle, polite, smile, show an interest, don't touch the girl. No need to say anything deep and meaningful about how much you care about her or anything else, because that's just words. You know, what you want to do is show through your behaviour the way you treat her and how you listen to what she wants and do it, you know, sort of keep her happy. That's the real proof of the pudding, and that was my strategy, or not strategy, but that was my attitude in my situation. Was I figured that when she went home to see the parents every week, she goes home to the parents every week, once a week for dinner and stuff, and I figured that if every time she went home she was happy, and then when they came to visit us they could see that we had a good house and it was all stable and happy and cool and calm, and it was good. We had good relationships with the neighbours, and, you know, basically living like good people, basically. You know, they can't help but accept that then, right? More easily. So, you know, it's just, the last thing you want to do is do the bull at a gate thing, and we see bull at the gate type foreigners here all the time. They turn up and, you know, they got tattoos up both arms, and so they wear cut-off sleeve shirts to show off the tattoos, and they strut around the place, and it's like, oh man, you know, you can do that if you want to, you really can, but in doing that sort of behaviour, you're alienating people all over the place, and you're making it difficult for them to be close to you, you know, or to not be close to you, but to accept you by that sort of behaviour. So, yeah, you just got to be as gentle as you can. What else would be the case? That's pretty much it. That's all you got to do, really. Just be gentle and quiet and smile and don't touch her. Don't touch the girl, and no need to say anything deep and meaningful. Just don't make any waves. That's probably about all you have to do to start off. I mean, you're just meeting the girlfriend, your girlfriend's parents. You're not asking them to marry her or anything. Although that is often a prejudice that they'll have. Quite often Japanese people don't, this isn't always the case, but quite often Japanese people don't meet the in-laws unless they are planning to get married. And that's often the case, but not always. We know exceptions to that. We know people who do spend time with their in-laws even though they're not married yet. You know, they're just boyfriend and girlfriend. So that's pretty much it. And then the rest of it's just etiquette and things, because we've got to watch out. We just got to watch out some of our natural behaviours. As you guys know from the how-to playlist, lots of our natural behaviours in our societies don't fly in Japan. So all that stuff on the how-to playlist about how to handle you know, chopsticks and eat all your food. You know, there's the little things like that can make a difference too. Being fussy about what you eat is considered to be childish in Japan. So most Japanese people will eat everything, and you ask people, Japanese people, even kids, what don't you like to eat? And most of them will say, oh, nothing, I like everything. Or they might have one thing, one obscure thing that they don't like to eat, but pretty much they eat everything. And then when you eat with people, you'll see that they eat everything. And every little piece of rice. So some of you might remember a video from years ago. I got in trouble once for leaving 6 or 7 grains of rice on a plate. And I'd eaten everything else, and there was just a few grains of rice scattered around on the plate. And my wife said, "Why do you always do that?" She went off. We'd been together for a few months, and she went off. "Why do you always do that?" And what? And leave rice on your plate. And so they'll sit there and they'll actually pick every grain of rice off the plate so that the plate's really clean when they're finished. They just do that. It's just considered to be, otherwise it's considered wasteful, you know. So that's considered to be the right thing to do. So, you know, don't be fussy about what you eat. Anything that they give you, just eat it and tell them how tasty it is, and that's pretty much it. Watch out if the father's a drinker. Watch out, because it's polite. It's polite if the father offers you a drink. In my case, the father-in-law does drink a bit. You know, he likes his sake and his beer, and it's good if you can have one or two with him. If that's what happens, he breaks out the sake or the beer. It is good if you can have one or two with him. But then it's pretty wise to stop too. Just drink really, really slowly, and don't get into the throwing it down drinking thing, because the last thing you want to do is end up drunk. Right, so one or two to be polite would be okay, and then if you can, stop and just tell him, "Oh, I'm a weak drinker," or something like that, and go back to drinking water or something would be safe, because you don't want to be drunk in a situation like that, of course. Probably telling you a lot of stuff you already know, but this is just sort of reinforcing it perhaps. But yeah, other than that, just the etiquette, you know, and be as quiet. It's hard. Quite often we come from societies where it's okay to sort of, you know, bomb, and we see foreigners do this, you know. And that tattoo comment, some of my best friends have tattoos, right? But when they come to Japan, I encourage them to cover them up with long sleeves and things, because there are some people here who really connect it with criminals and things, and things like that can really change the whole tone of an experience like this. And if you walked into meeting the parents with tattoos showing, it would not be a good idea. You know, it's just better. Again, if people want to come and do their own thing and do it their way, that they can do that. But our advice is that you want to try and make as little ripples as possible. You don't want to come in here and make a big splash. And lots of people do that. They bomb dive into Japan, and they walk around and they talk loudly, and they're center of attention, and they'll go home and tell everybody that everyone loved them in Japan, and they feel like everybody does, because they're missing the subtlety. Everybody's being nice to them and smiling at them, and they're getting the impression that their attitude's doing well. They're fine, they love me. In actual fact, people are sort of looking sideways at them a bit and shaking their heads, but they're not noticing that, because they're being too loud to notice, you know. So it's that look, listen and learn video that we made. You're better off being super quiet, super gentle, and just pay attention to what's going on. It really is the better way. You know, in our Japanese family, I'm probably one of the quietest people in the group when we get together as a group. You know, there's a few reasons for that. One is that if a big day with the family speaking Japanese is pretty tiring anyway. You know, it takes it out of you. It doesn't matter how good your Japanese might be, it takes it out of you having a big day with the family. So if you can just sit quietly and listen and pay attention to what's going on, and they'll like you for it, because they're not making the big splash. You're just sitting quietly and listening and smiling and, you know, and participating, you know, but you're not making a big splash. That's probably, if you had to sum this up into one sentence, don't make a big splash. Just quietly slip in there quietly with a nice smile and be nice to everybody, and don't try and be, you know, interesting and windswept and interesting or anything like that. Just be as quiet and gentle. This particular guy this video is for, we've exchanged a few emails, so I've got a bit of an idea what sort of character this person is. So a lot of what I'm saying is going to be obvious to you. I know that, but it's just this is reinforcing it for you, and also just for anyone else who's watching this who might end up in a similar situation. You know, just slip in quietly. This is the advice we give to our friends when they come. You know, quite often our friends will come from Australia or from other places and say, what, you know, any advice, and this is the sort of advice that we give, and we give them the book, of course, the How to Do Stuff in Japan book, and so they can read that before they come as well. And then, you know, this is the advice. Just, you know, one of our friends has got tats all over him, and, you know, we'll just cover the tats up as much as possible, because that little stuff like that, it can make a difference here. It can. And then people say it shouldn't make any difference. Well, it shouldn't, but it does. What should and shouldn't be are irrelevant. We don't worry about what should and shouldn't be. We focus on what is. And what is that in Japanese society, you know, tattoos lots of people. You know, it is changing. Japan's getting more modern, and things like tattoos are, you know, younger people some of the younger people can think it's okay, but even then, you won't know. Some younger people say, oh, cool, look at your cool tattoos, that's very cool. But you don't know what they're really thinking. They might be thinking, I'm not inviting you to a party at my house because my parents would freak if they knew I had a friend with tattoos, right? Quite possibly. Or I can't be your girlfriend or your boyfriend because you got tattoos. That's really, really likely. You know, so sorry guys, don't want to focus on the tattoo thing, but it's just a really good example where in most of our countries these days tattoos are fashionable, right? So wearing a cut-off shirt and showing your tattoos is a fashionable thing to do in a lot of our countries now, whereas it's an example of something that it's cool just about anywhere else, but it's still not really cool in Japan. And there's a lot of things like that, you know, being the interesting guy, making lots of jokes. Oh, jokes, that's the other thing. Don't make jokes. Don't make jokes, because the sense of humor thing is quite often so different that if you sit there and make a joke that you think's obviously funny, it might not be here. And again, you don't have to be. You don't have to be the funny guy. You don't have to be the entertaining guy. It's not the way to go at all. You're better off just sitting and listening and let someone else be the funny guy, because jokes often fall flat here. If you apply something that would be funny in your country to here, quite often they're not. And it's subtle, and then there's language differences that mess it up as well. And so you don't try and be funny. You know, just relax. I think one thing, this is probably not a good piece of advice, but one thing to remember is that she is the person that you wanting to be with, not them. So you just got to make the time with the in-laws as least dramatic or as least difficult as possible. And just keep in the back of your mind that as long as she wants to be with you, everything's okay, right? And that might help take the pressure down on you a bit. You're not trying to make the family fall in love with you. You're just trying to go in there as gently as possible and not create a splash, you know, and then that night will be over, won't it? And you'll be out of there again. Assuming you're not staying in their house. Jesus, that'd be... If you're staying in their house, go back and watch all the videos on the How to Do Stuff in the Japan playlist again, because that would be a challenge. But just something that is worth keeping in mind, I applied this strategy, is that I thought, well look, most as long as she's happy and she still wants to be with me, you know, it doesn't really matter about the in-laws, but you just want to, they don't have to love you, you just have to don't do anything that's going to really upset them or anything that's going to cause a big splash, and because they're going to be pretty nervous too. You know, they won't have had a foreigner walk into their house before, probably. With that too, they might have you go to their house, or they might have you go to a restaurant. That's often what they'll do, as a sort of a neutral place. But either way, they probably haven't sat round. Their daughter probably hasn't brought a foreigner home before, probably. So it's going to be pretty freaky for them and pretty new and sort of scary for them as well. So just, you know, keep that in mind. They're nervous as well. So by being quiet and gentle and smiling a lot and not making a big splash, they'll be relieved probably. So, and just watch it. That video we made recently about friends in Japan, you know, don't expect to get close to them, and don't try to get close to them. Just keep it polite and very polite and a little bit distant. Don't try and get close to them, because that can backfire as well, make them more uncomfortable. So just polite, gentle. Don't touch her. Don't say anything dramatic. Just try and be as low key as possible. Don't make a splash. So that's probably about all we can do for now. And watch all the how-to videos again. Read the book. Read the How to Do Stuff in Japan book, which you'll have. I know you've got that because we sent that to you. I know that. That's good. Okay. All right. There you go. Good luck. Good luck with that. Let us know how it goes. More videos coming soon.